It's 1996 and you, a 13-year-old, awaits the release of Tomb Raider. The era of 3D gaming was just about to shift into high gears. You convinced your parents to update the aging DX2 family PC for a new Intel Pentium chip. 16 megabytes of system memory, a large hard drive, Sound Blaster 16 for audio, and of course a graphics card. But which one? ATI, Matrox, Rendition, PowerVR and Nvidia all had their own offerings. But you decided to go with a well-established name, S3. You heard about 3DFX, but those cards may not be out when Tomb Raider hits the shelves. And they are just 3D add-on cards, which means you would have to buy 2 graphics cards. Good luck explaining that to your parents. The ViRGE, on the other hand, was a single card that offered excellent 2D capabilities as well as 3D for half the price of a 3DFX combo. Also, your parents shouldn't know that you're building a gaming PC.
Blast his freaky head off!
So, you decide to save the 3DFX premium and instead get a faster Pentium 166. You know, for bragging rights at school and future-proofing the system. And here we are at the end of 1996 with your brand new PC, the ViRGE DX, starting up Tomb Raider for the very first time. I hope I could set the scene for this video, so today we are going to look at Tomb Raider running on a ViRGE DX. Yes, this is the second generation of ViRGE cards, but you will see during the video that there was really no point in getting the original ViRGE for Tomb Raider. Before the arrival of 3D accelerators, we were limited to software rendering. It was the task of the CPU to render your graphics. And they did. Not very well, but they did. You had to turn down your resolution for a playable frame rate. 320 by 200. Look at those giant pixels. Of course, you could switch to SVGA, 640 by 480, but even the shiny new Pentium 166 is hopelessly overwhelmed by this task. You had several options to make it playable. Reduce the details or reduce the render window size. And that was kind of working. Just don't reduce the details too low because otherwise your textures are starting to morph around. A phenomena that will appear not only in software mode, but also in 3D accelerated mode, as we will see later. I've put together all my research and tools in one place, S3ViRGE.com. You'll find all the videos and blog posts I have created over the past few weeks there. I actually used Porkbun to set up the domain for this site, and they made the configuration super simple and quick. What really stood out was the transparency in pricing. Most registrars lure you in with cheap prices for the first year and then hit you with a massive renewal fee. Porkbun sells most of their domains at cost, so the renewal price stays low and predictable. Plus, and this is a big one for us tech-curious types, they don't make basic security a budget consideration. You get free WHOIS privacy to keep your personal info off the web and free SSL certificates included with every eligible domain. The interface is clean, there are no annoying upsells during checkout, and if you ever get stuck, they actually have real human support available 365 days a year. No loops of automated phone menus or useless AI bots. It's no wonder they have been ranked the #1 domain registrar by USA Today and Forbes Advisor. So if you're looking for a professional home for your next project, head over to porkbun.com. Use my link and code in the video description to get $1 off your next domain. And now, let's see how far we can push the S3 ViRGE. So, time to see what your new ViRGE DX can do. So the card we're using today is clocked at 77 MHz. By the way, this is maybe a really good spot to talk about how a ViRGE DX is not equal to a ViRGE DX. Here, for instance, I have 2 Diamond Stealth 3D 2000 Pro cards. Same BIOS stickers, same memory speeds, different clock frequencies. One is clocked at 57 MHz, the other one at 72. And another discovery, some ViRGE cards get extremely hot, north of 65 degrees. And that is at the stock frequency of 50 MHz. Most of the models from well-known brands, however, remain cool. 45 to 50 degrees at a frequency of 70 MHz or more. I'm not sure if it has anything to do with this, but I have noticed that all my S3 ViRGE DX chips made in Korea are much cooler than the ones from Taiwan. Even on the Diamond Stealth 3D 2000 Pro, the lower clocked chip is from Taiwan, and it does get hotter than the one from Korea. But even then, none of these two cards get to the extreme heat of cards like this. Anyway, now let's find out how the ViRGE DX 77 MHz handled Tomb Raider. For this to work, we need to get the S3D patch. It is one executable that you can just copy into your Tomb Raider folder and start the game with that. Only ViRGE cards work with Tomb Raider and S3D. No Trio 3D, no Savage, just the ViRGE. And here we are in the game. The first thing we want to check out is what we get in the details menu. Now we can pick from 3 resolutions. The standard resolutions we have seen in software, 320 by 200 and 640 by 480. But now there is an in-between setting, 512 by 384. We also get bilinear filtering and an option for perspective. Since we haven't seen the game in the new resolution, this is the first one to try. And here is Tomb Raider at the beginning at 30 frames per second. Wow, we are running a high resolution and the game is rendering at 30 frames per second. Actually, it's so fast that the game engine is capping our frame rate. But the moment we move forward, well, we are dropping into the low 20s. But still, the game feels really smooth. To be honest, when I look at this, I don't really think that the ViRGE DX deserves the name of 3D Decelerator. I may have picked the sweet spot right now, 512 by 384, a resolution that just simply isn't available in software rendering. And all I can say is, this is actually a playable frame rate. If I would have gotten the game in this state back in 1996, I definitely would have played it. Now let's have a look at bilinear filtering. Here you can see the prints in the snow that are quite pixely, but the moment we switch on bilinear filtering, you see them, well, smoothed out. They look a lot better. They are no longer as sharp, but the pixels blend into each other, so this is really nice. Unfortunately, our frame rate does drop a little bit. Your frame rate will drop 20 to 40% depending on which area you are and probably how many textures are filtered. But if you're playing a fast-paced game like Tomb Raider, solving puzzles, fighting enemies, I think you might not even notice. And maybe it's okay to disable bilinear filtering. Let's move the resolution 1 up to have a direct comparison with software rendering. So to get an apples-to-apples comparison from what we had before, we have to disable bilinear filtering. And with a higher resolution, we are dropping around 3 to 5 frames per second as it looks like. So instead of the low 20s, we had like 22, 23 frames, we're at 20 and we even dipped to 18. So let's turn on bilinear filtering and see how this changes. And here we are. We no longer are at 30 frames per second or the low 20s. Now we are at 15 frames per second when we are starting right at the entrance. Oh, and I just want to show you quickly what is going on when we switch off the perspective setting. You will see these textures morphing around everywhere. Yeah, so this is a setting that you should keep enabled all the time. And luckily it doesn't seem to consume any performance. Here is a small test at 320 by 200. This is the only configuration where you can switch on bilinear filtering and you're still hitting the frame cap. Well, for this resolution, you probably could just use software rendering. Software rendering in general was brighter than the one that is coming from the ViRGE DX, but I think the overall image quality is just better using software rendering. So yeah, the filtering doesn't really help much with a small resolution like this. Also, if you switch off perspective, you can see how these textures just move around everywhere. So S3 kind of introduced a cheat code by introducing a new resolution 512 by 384. And this is probably the only resolution with bilinear filtering off to play Tomb Raider on a ViRGE DX. At least this is what I conclude from my tests. Here, for instance, we have the large open area with 2 wolves, and yes, the frame rate does drop to 18 and 17 frames per second. Yes, we do have drops, but I believe we would see the same in software rendering. Here's another example where we drop quite significantly, sometimes even to single-digit frame rates. Larger areas definitely take a toll on the ViRGE DX. Now here's the comparison how it would look like in SVGA software rendered, and I'm pretty sure you can say that we're in the single digits all the time. And here's the other area, and here we are dropping most likely below 5 frames per second. So yes, the S3 ViRGE definitely had something to offer, I believe. You could pick a higher resolution than the 320 by 200 and the game rendered in an acceptable frame rate most of the time. Yes, there were the occasional dips, but the game visuals do look a lot nicer. Gradients look so much nicer than in software. Lara keeps her shadow, which I understood is only possible if you have a ViRGE DX with 4 megabytes. If you run the game with 2 megabytes, the shadow is apparently not there. And my overall experience with the ViRGE DX is, well, I would have expected worse, to be honest, with all the hype around the ViRGE being a 3D decelerator. Considering that the original ViRGE was released mid-1996, I don't think that the second version is such a bad card, which is built on the architecture of the first version, obviously. But if you disagree with it, please let me know in the comments. And now let's just have a brief glimpse of how Tomb Raider runs on an original ViRGE. Also, this version of the ViRGE only has 2 megabytes. Let's see if Lara has her shadow. And we pick the resolution 512 by 384 just to have the same baseline, what I think is the best resolution to play Tomb Raider on. And here we are in the game. And actually, Lara does have her shadow, even though it doesn't look as nice as it did before. But, well, she does have the shadow, so I'm confused. Despite the fact that the shadow is here or not, we can see that the original ViRGE is around 5 frames slower. So that's in the range of around 25 to 30% slower than the ViRGE DX. And I'm sure in some areas it can get even worse. Okay, this is all I wanted to cover in this video. I wanted to have a look how the S3 ViRGE is handling Tomb Raider with the S3D patch. As I said before, I am positively surprised by the ViRGE. I expected it to be much worse. Let me know in the comments if you played Tomb Raider with an S3 ViRGE DX or even the original ViRGE. And also let me know if you have any idea why some of these ViRGE DX chips run so hot while others remain cool, even though the cooler ones are clocked at much higher frequencies. And this is it for today. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you Porkbun for sponsoring this video. Also a big thanks to all my Patreons and the people supporting Bits and Bolts here on YouTube. If you want to become a member, please head over to Patreon or become a member right here on YouTube. And of course, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, maybe now is a good time to do that. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for watching, and I hope I will see you in my next video. Take care and bye bye.